currently, what kind of crimes are you seeing the most? In the sense that, I'll give you one example, that in one of the instances that we were handling, somebody had reached out to us and they said that, I was looking for a job now, because especially after the lockdown, and the job situation has become really bad for people. So this person was looking for a job, and on LinkedIn she reached out to someone, and that person misrepresented as being, in some other organization, because they had mentioned that designation. And she spoke about, the job, and she naturally gave her CV. The CV had the phone number and some of her other details, including her address. And it became very easy for this person to then, kind of track her, talk to her, probably cajole her into talking. Those could be other scenarios as well, which in this case didn't happen, but that's a very much of a possibility, where the person says, okay, you know what, you meet me, or you do this for me, and I'll ensure that I get you the job. So, but this was one example. In your experience, what kind of crimes are you seeing a lot?
Unfortunately, people still are very gullible. I always tell that there are two things that drive this world: fear and greed. I won't call it greed when, for instance, somebody is reaching out for a job. It is fear of being unemployed, right? So they want this. And in fact, these job scams were doing the rounds phenomenally. It was huge already, even before COVID. But with COVID, it's becoming much worse. So it's like a full-fledged racket. It's not just a one-off kind of scam, where people will call you and they know, because you may have put up your profile on one of those job hunting sites online, and then they troll those sites and collect information about you, and then they will reach out to you as if they are offering you a job. Everything will seem so authentic. Even a letterhead would be forged as if it is of one of the top multinational technology companies, etc. And every parent has a dream of the child working for a multinational. Every youngster has this dream of wanting to work and travel abroad, etc. It's still a big thing in India to, get your first travel outside India and all that. So when these scams happen invariably, and this is where you need to be careful on that, they will ask you for deposit of monies for administrative costs. No company really asks for that. So the minute somebody asks you for money, you need to be really careful. You have to be wary immediately. Do not deposit. And we've come across cases where the deposits are in the names of individuals. Why, which company will allow for deposits in the name of individuals? That should have been an indication enough for people to not fall for those scams. So anyway, that is on an aside. In terms of the trends which you were asking about, and I'm restricting my answer now to offenses against individuals and not getting into the offenses against companies and whatever, which is what we predominantly otherwise handle. So when we talk about offenses against individuals, cyberbullying, because today people actually think that there is no law to prevent cyberbullying or to punish cyberbullying. It is so wrong. Depending on the manner in which bullying is done, you can be prosecuted, right? But everything depends on the facts of each case. There cannot be a one-size-fits-all kind of provision. Cyber stalking. You now have a specific provision for cyber stalking, and we see too much of that, in fact, even in terms of corporate setups. So, every company has two kinds of policies, harassment policies and sexual harassment policies. So I've handled cases which were blatant stalking, blatant stalking within a company, corporate entity, but just stopping short of sexual harassment. So the whole issue then that comes up, and in a way it is resolved actually in today's scenario with the inclusion of what amounts to sexual harassment in IPC as well as under the Sexual Harassment Act. Merely the gender itself may lend itself in terms of tagging it as sexual harassment. But otherwise, it can get very, very scary. I mean, like it can lead to women being completely, losing their mental equanimity on these kind of things. So these have to be taken very seriously, and these trends have to be noted and addressed in corporate policies. Again, that's on an aside. In terms of, again, coming back to individual crimes, revenge porn, very scary process, and I hate to even use this tagline, but that's the colloquial term that seems to have caught on to explain this kind of offense. Please go and look up this recent set of cases that happened in a southern state. To be very specific, please look for Pollachi Sex Scandal. I felt they should not have even tagged it as Pollachi sexual scandal, because it's not a sexual scandal. It's Pollachi sexual offenses. It's a blatant offense of cyber extortion against women, young women. Yeah? And even the scary part of it was not just students or even teachers were victims of this crime. So the modus was this: either consensual relationships or forced. For instance, one girl, I think, had complained about how she thought she was meeting her boyfriend in a marketplace or the public place. And then he brings a car and says, let's go somewhere and all. And then suddenly she realizes 4 people are there in the car. She's molested and it's recorded. And then the recording is used against her. So these are what are called as revenge porn. 2 people may consensually take recordings or videos or photos or whatever of their relationship. And then when the relationship breaks up, one person then threatens the other, saying that they will expose these recordings or videos or photos if XYZ. So the XYZ could be either continuation of the relationship, sexual favors. In many cases, we've come across of monetary recording, claims, etc. So these are all tagged as revenge porn. It's scary because even, between husband and wife, content which is actually recorded consensually then is misused. So it could be a relationship, it could be between husband and wife, it could be also just blatant abuse of online spaces where somebody is threatened, saying if you do not share something, either they will be harmed or their family will be harmed or their friend will be harmed. And then, they look at the way these kind of offenses happen. You are sitting in the comfort of your home. You're probably also sitting in this privacy of your own bedroom or your room, right? The door is locked. So you think it's just you in the room. You don't realize that when you're speaking to the screen, you're probably speaking to definitely another person, but it could be several thousand or million people also. So people forget that and they get lulled into the sense of comfort, and they share things which they wouldn't dare share if it is one-on-one. And then these get abused or misused. And this is what we see maximum of in terms of individual crimes. And the best way to prevent and protect against it. I didn't want to use the word avoid it because it's very easy to say, don't do this, don't do that. But you have to assume that people may still be experimental. So if you're going to be experimental, the way I would say prevent and protect. In fact, one of the main reasons I started Cyber Sati was this, that we found that in many instances, victims thought that they did not have a remedy. Victims thought that, in those old day things, you look at movies, and today's movies are all about vigilante justice. And it's very scary. Everything is about how the systems will not work. You have no remedies out there. So you only have to take law into your own hands or succumb to a criminal's extortion or blackmail, right? So I wanted to dispel this myth. I wanted to spread the word saying, you can prevent and protect yourself against all this if you know that this is a trend of crime that is happening. 2, let's assume that if, in spite of all these warnings, you have indulged and you are now being threatened. You must have confidence in the system. You should know that even if there may not be 100% success, even a 50% success rate is not a bad thing. But if you don't take recourse of law, not only are you depriving yourself of justice, but you're actually emboldening the criminal to go and commit the same crime against other victims. And that is what happened in the Pollachi sexual scandal. So if the first victim had put in a criminal complaint, at least another 50 people would have been saved, if not more. It took one braveheart girl who, when she was subjected to blackmail, uh, she decided, no, I will not succumb to blackmail. And she, along with the support of her family, her brother and her family, went and gave the complaint. At that stage also, they gave the complaint because when the brother had gone to confront these boys who were threatening her, initially he thought it was just his sister was the victim, and then he finds out many more people are victimized. And so he takes courage to go and give this complaint. Even then, they don't realize how big a racket this is. As police start investigating, that is when they find out that it's actually become a racket instead of just a scandal, as they want to call it, or whatever. Because again, I want people to shy away from these kind of words, because I feel the minute you use words like scandal, you're actually victimizing the victim further. You're trying to focus more on the victim rather than the criminal. You should just call it Pollachi sexual criminal acts, right? Then the focus will be on the criminals and why youngsters should not be committing these kind of crimes. These are absolute youngsters in their early 20s who are committing these kind of crimes. We've come across instances where teenagers are committing crimes like this, right? Your colleague, your office colleague may be committing crimes like this. The other kind of crime. One aspect which I talked about in terms of the Pollachi case is of actual videos, right? The other is of morphing of these videos. So they take your photos from Facebook or any of these social media sites and then morph it into all kinds of sexually explicit content or nude content, etc. And then they use this to either threaten you or actually circulate it. And in one case, again, this is a southern case. It's not like all this happens only in South India. It happens all over the world, not just in India. It just so happens that this was an unfortunately drastic outcome, and therefore I'm using this, where the girl committed suicide because morphed pictures of her were circulated on WhatsApp. And when she stepped out, the problem with things like WhatsApp and Facebook, etc., is that this kind of content is being circulated amongst your own circle of family and friends. It's not just some unknown people who are looking at your content. And that's why the victims feel more victimized. That's why they are more scared. But this is where the message I wanted to share through Cyber Sati was, do not allow fear to rule. Do not take such drastic measures like how this girl committed suicide. Why should the girl victimize herself and her family further? Would she not have been better off informing her family that these are morphed pictures and it's not I? Unfortunately, in this particular case, the victim had written a handwritten letter before she committed suicide saying, even my family didn't believe it's not I. And I find it very scary and worrisome. So for instance, we had taken a morphed picture case to the police for registering a complaint. And the police's first reaction was to interrogate the girl. Are you sure you didn't share this kind of content? Are you sure this is not you? And then I had to intervene there to say, so what if it is her? And then the girl is becoming very defensive to say, no, but it's not me. And, it's so embarrassing for her to explain why it is not her. But is it for the victim to even do that? Because the law doesn't say that if you had shared this, that it is an offense. The law is talking about dissemination of this content without the consent of this victim, right?
Absolutely.
Or dissemination of sexually explicit content. So why is it that even the police make a victim feel like she is at fault? So these are things which I hope will change. But the one message I really want to again reiterate is, victims have to know that they have remedies. Even lawyers sometimes do not miss the point, because just because you don't have a provision which says revenge porn doesn't mean that it can go without punishment. There are enough provisions in law which provide the remedies. And it is a very basic principle of law that a heading of a section is irrelevant. It is the content of the section that matters. So victims have to take courage to file cases, because if they file, that is when these kind of criminals will not get emboldened. Two others also who may think of committing these crimes will be deterred, because they will know that they can be caught and they will be punished, right? And third, then women and children can also have a much more safer online space.
Yeah, I think very rightly said. And especially the examples that you gave, I think in our experience also we've been getting quite similar. The nature is quite similar. So when as you were speaking, I was feeling like it's very alarming, because it almost seems like a trend that someone would probably get into an engagement with you, which is like a more like a physical relationship also along with the romantic relationship, and somewhere down the line you also give in, and that is recorded maybe with or without consent. And then eventually there is a threat that's coming in that it's going to be exposed, or you are going to be exposed, or we'll inform other people about you, or you give me so much money and I'm going to keep quiet. So it's actually very scary that these are the kind of trends that are coming up nowadays. And I think the other thing also that we have seen, and tell me if you have also seen this trend, is that a lot of people do complain about being stalked online nowadays. And I think you did mention about this, but in terms of examples also, have you also come across scenarios where people have been stalked? And if yes, then how have you seen these instances coming up?
Yeah, very, very scary instances. In fact, I've handled cases like this in India and also outside India. One of the scariest cases I handled, and I'm giving this example to show that, we are very quick to comment or complain about our systems. It's an indictment of any system that it has failed its victims. But more importantly, I'm mentioning this case because I want systems to prepare themselves to give better protection for victims. It is not enough, and this is what actually, in fact, I think I ended the article, this tackling freedom and unfreedom of women, which I mentioned about. You'll find it on IT for Change on their website. I think I closed the article with this about how in one case, I think it was the New York police or something, where when this lady is a gamer, she reports on gaming, and therefore her very existence, her work is only online. Your social media handles have today become a very important tool of your profession. To tell you stop using your social media handles, I would say, is actually a violation of your fundamental right in itself, right? Because it impinges on your trade and commerce, etc. The second aspect, your social media handles or your online presence is also your connect to the world today. And I'm not talking about COVID times, I'm talking even pre-COVID, right? This is how we were reaching out.
Yeah.
This is a way of life today. To tell somebody, why don't you just stop using social media? Or why don't you rethink? Why don't you change your handle? Why don't you change your address? Why don't you change your email ID? It is akin to telling somebody, change your name, change where you're living, change your identity, go incognito, go anonymous, etc. Can all of us live like that? Short of locking ourselves, and we are seeing even during COVID, can we handle a situation where we are locked into our house with no communication outside? It's impossible. You can't live like that. So how are you going to be able to live this way? And this is the kind of case I handled in USA. Okay, the stalking starts at college level, where this person, very polite, very proper. So this is the other problem that I've seen in many cases in India also. Merely because the language that the stalker uses is very polite. Firstly, when you're using English, people think it's perfectly fine. It is not. Two, when it does not contain horrific words or statements, again, they think it's okay. But the very fact that somebody is contacting you again and again, even when you have specifically told them that you do not want to be contacted, is still stalking, irrespective of the kind of language that is being used. So here was a situation where the person was very polite, very proper, but continuously connecting, insisting on meetings, insisting on being in touch. And also, that veiled threat, I know where you live kind. I know where you are. I know where you live. I know what you are wearing today. I know what perfume you were using, and that means this is a person who is very proximate to you. It's not just somebody who's seen you online, right? So that makes it that much more scary for a woman. That this is someone she doesn't even know who's stalking her. And let me put it this way: have we individually not faced situations like that? I have personally faced this in my younger days. So it's a very alarming and scary situation to be in, where you do not know who's stalking you, you do not know what they are stalking you for, and you are also not in a position to even tell them stay away. And then after you find out also, it's not an easy task, because they just refuse to take no for an answer. So here was a situation where, after it had reached a point where complaints were filed, and then the educational institution had put a restraint order, and that was being followed until both parties were in the educational institution. The minute they come out of it into the working space, anyone would have thought with a few years, particularly of gap, stalking would stop. In this case, it resumed. And when we were trying to activate the legal system, it was very shocking for me to find out that casually the police, they were saying, why don't you just change your address? Why don't you just stop using social media? These are the standard lines which I have talked about in the article, but I have referred to other instances in the US, like this Gamergate instance and all that. So, whether it's India, whether it's the US or any other jurisdiction, to tell a woman to stay indoors, to say just lock yourself up for some time because that way you can protect yourself, is not acceptable. To tell a woman to keep off social media platforms or to not be online, why do you want to put so many Twitter comments? If you comment on Twitter, then you're only inviting all these comments from others, no? So why do you want to do this? Why do you want to post your photograph on Facebook or any of the other platforms? Why don't you just stop yourself from doing that? Are these really acceptable statements? Are these really permissible, and are they even real? Can you really live by these standards? So to give do's and don'ts is very easy. To live by it is very difficult. So what we need today is not being dictated to or told what we should or should not do. What we need are better enforcement mechanisms where a troller will be shown that he can be tracked, a stalker will be shown that they can be prosecuted, and a harasser online will be shown that they cannot get away with these kind of harassments, especially when they are providing proof of commission of a crime by themselves.
Yeah. I think I really like this point when you said that, telling the victim what to do and not to do. So it almost seems like it's almost funny for me on some level that, earlier it used to be, earlier and even now, that, why you walking out in the night? Why you, wearing X kind of clothes or Y kind of clothes? It almost seems like in the virtual world that has got substituted with this. That, why would you put up pictures of yourselves, or why would you, comment and, talk and do other things? So